What is a game that was made in the year 2000 being remade in the year 2024 on a game engine that came out in 2011 look like? Well, pretty wild actually. Believe it or not, this is a Skyrim mod. It's a project called Vampire the Masquerade Redemption Reawakened. Yeah, a bit of a mouthful, but the Reawakened is the new part of that game title. Basically, a modder who goes by Galero and his community are remaking the cult classic first Vampire the Masquerade game using Skyrim's modding toolkit, which might sound a little odd considering out of all the possible engines one could use, they're going for Skyrim, which is totally bizarre, but also kind of cool at the same time. And of course, it begs the question, why would anyone do this? How could you even do this? It's clearly a massive undertaking. Well, today I'm diving down the rabbit hole of what this whole project is even about. Let's start off with some context. The World of Darkness series is a vampire-themed tabletop role-playing game from the 90s that was converted into a video game series in 2000. And the first game, Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, which is the one I'm talking about in this video, put the whole World of Darkness franchise on the map for gamers. Basically an entirely new audience to enjoy this lore and world crafting. However, back when the game came out, it was generally considered to be very visually impressive, but it also had a lot of mixed reviews when it came to the actual gameplay. Nonetheless, a lot of the magic from the original tabletop game bled over into the game series enough to develop a cult fan base. Plus, it was pretty much the only immersive vampire sim around, and thus became the whole new World of Darkness game series, followed by multiple sequels over the years. So with that said, I could absolutely see why fans of the series would want a preservation of the original games in the series. So getting into the mod, its actual planned release date is pretty much when it's ready, and it'll launch for free on the Nexus Mods website, though you'll still need a copy of Skyrim to play it. And while it's mainly being developed by Galero, a Fallout and Skyrim modder, he also has a full Discord of people who are helping out with modeling, animation, voice acting, playtesting, and the likes. He announced the idea for the project back in late 2020 and released the first development update in 2021, so it's been in the works for quite a while, and the early previews of the mod looked kind of like a dress-up version of Skyrim. There wasn't anything super crazy going on at that point. But the more recent development videos have shown a radical transformation. It would honestly be hard for anyone outside of, say, the UI that's in the game to even tell that this has anything to do with Skyrim, especially when playing, say, the modern-day sections of the game. Now, obviously, we know that the core of the game is Skyrim, so if you're deeply familiar with Skyrim, it'll slowly become more and more apparent that Reawakened is built with the same tools, but you'd also be hard-pressed to find any other Skyrim mod with good gun mechanics and proper modern aesthetics like this one has, which, I mean, honestly, I never thought I'd be talking about a Skyrim mod in 2024, let alone one that has good gunplay mechanics. Just such a weird thing to say. Now, unfortunately, I can't show off the full mod in all its glory, as it's not really publicly available yet and playtesting is being limited to select people. But I went down the devlog rabbit hole and have become weirdly obsessed with this bizarre project, as clearly many others have as well. So generally, the goal of the project is to faithfully recreate the original game's experience with some fixes and additions of reworked cut content, but additional custom content and features will also be added after all of the core elements are done. One of the cooler changes, though, is properly realizing the original game's first-person mode. The original Redemption let you hold the Z key to get a first-person perspective while playing, but it was pretty limited and didn't really integrate with the combat or gameplay systems very well. Most people just played third-person. So Reawakened's first-person perspective is a really cool update to the original game. The latest developer update represents 15 months of progress since the previous devlog, so it's been a while. All of the game's core mechanics like criminal and masquerade violations have been implemented. Basically, if you get caught doing vampire stuff in the world, it'll react like the original game did. Police will try to arrest you, civilians will panic, etc., making the world feel more immersive. Now, if you get too low on blood, which is used by your abilities in the game, you'll go into a frenzy and basically start attacking everyone in sight. Feeding mechanics have been implemented for the system, so you can basically top off on NPCs when you're thirsty. And just generally speaking, the overall quality of this mod looks very impressive. Now, of course, my first question about this whole project was, why Skyrim as an engine? Well, there could be a couple of reasons. The first is that being a mod rather than a standalone game, this gives the devs some level of legal protection, or at least the illusion of legal protection. Thankfully, this is not a Nintendo IP that they're working with. They're not technically making their own game, they're just extensively modding Skyrim beyond recognition in the image of another game, which puts the project into a gray area where, generally speaking, companies aren't attracted to take them down, but they probably could if they wanted to. Now, the second reason is that Skyrim's modding tools support key mechanics like magic and potions, while also including the medieval art style assets and gameplay systems required for Redemption's historical setting. The original game featured two totally unique time periods, a medieval one where vampires act basically in the open, and a modern one where they're forced to live more in the shadows. So having mod tools out of the box for at least half of the original game has probably been a pretty big help in terms of development speed. That said, the modern sections of this game actually look really good. Redemption is set in various locations, but the modern day ones are specifically London and New York City, and the mod's recreation of London looks fantastic. It has great aesthetic and style. The atmospheric, being rain-soaked and hazy, really sells the feeling of a city with vampires lurking in all the shadows. And aside from some character models that are just dressed up Skyrim NPCs, I don't think that you would immediately go, that's Skyrim, when you're watching the actual gameplay. Now, despite the cult status of Vampire the Masquerade's Redemption and even the sequel Bloodlines, neither game received proper re-releases, remasters, or remakes. The studio involved in making these games basically closed up shop, or they sold the rights off to Activision, and they've more or less been in limbo ever since. That said, Microsoft, who recently acquired Activision, also just announced that they have a new team dedicated to game preservation, which is really cool, one of the cooler moves that Microsoft has made in the past year. So it seems like there's a future in which there's a decent chance at which some of these original games will get official remasters, provided that there's enough interest and the cost of doing so isn't too crazy. Or maybe they'll start working with some of the modding teams to do it in a more official capacity. But in the meantime, this mod is looking very impressive and will likely serve as one of the best ways for fans and new players to jump into an important part of gaming history. Activision is definitely aware of this mod's development, and they haven't approved the Reawakening mod, but they've also suggested that they won't pursue legal action unless it impacts the sales of the original game. And Galero is currently awaiting a more concrete answer from Activision's legal team before pushing the project into full production, which is interesting. I can't imagine that most of these big companies would give full concrete answers in this regard, simply so that they don't lock themselves into a situation where they can't take legal action. But it seems like these days Microsoft is really trying to do right by a lot of gamers, so we'll see what happens. He expects to have another development update published about a year from now, so I'll be waiting to see what kind of progress they make then. That said, there's a ton of hype building around this mod. They also have an active Discord server giving constant updates on the progress behind the scenes, so if you get really interested in this project, you can follow it there. I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about this wild project in the comments. Some mods end up becoming the biggest way to preserve classic titles and even improve upon them. Stalker Anomaly, for example, has done a massive service to keep the original Stalker games playable and has certainly helped build hype for the upcoming Stalker 2. And if you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop me a like, subscribe for more content, like it, ding the notification bell to beat the YouTube algorithm with me. And next up, check out this crazy Zelda Ocarina of Time remaster in the Unreal Engine. It's simply stunning. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.